There's a quiet kind of shame many people carry, one that isn't often spoken about. You look around and see your friends getting married, building families, posting anniversaries, and you wonder, what's wrong with me? You've loved, you've tried, you've hoped, and yet every time it ends before it truly begins. 5 months, maybe less, and now at 40 you find yourself asking a question that echoes in the silence of your own heart. Am I unlovable, or have I simply not learned what love really needs to grow? Today I want to tell you something that might surprise you. Being single at 40 is not a failure. It's an invitation to finally meet the one person you've been avoiding all along, yourself, because love doesn't begin when someone chooses you. It begins when you learn to choose yourself, with tenderness, with truth, with patience. So if you've never had a relationship that lasted, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your story is still unfolding. And perhaps your greatest relationship hasn't even begun yet. If this message spoke to you, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear these words today. This is Esther Wisdom, where love meets understanding. There's a quiet, often unspoken pain that follows those who reach their 40s without what the world calls a lasting relationship. It's not just the loneliness of being without a partner, it's the story we begin to tell ourselves about what that means. You go to dinner parties, where people talk about their children, their anniversaries, their shared mortgages, and you smile, nodding politely, while something in you tightens, not because you envy their lives, but because a small voice whispers, "Why hasn't it happened for me?" We live in a culture that measures success in love by milestones. Dating, commitment, marriage, longevity. When you haven't reached those markers, society treats you as an exception, sometimes even as a problem to be fixed. The implication is that love is a race, and you've fallen behind. But what if that assumption is deeply flawed? What if love isn't something to be achieved on a schedule, but rather something that unfolds when we're ready, not when the calendar says we should be? The silent shame of singleness often doesn't come from being alone, but from the story we think others are telling about our solitude. The glances, the questions, "Why are you still single?" They land differently after a certain age. They turn curiosity into judgment and self-reflection into self-blame. We start to view our history of short relationships not as experience, but as evidence of failure. And slowly, without realizing it, we internalize the idea that being single at 40 must mean we are somehow unlovable, broken, or incomplete. But shame is deceptive. It disguises itself as truth. It tells you that because something hasn't happened yet, it never will. It erases all the complexity, all the circumstances, all the choices that brought you here, choices that might have been brave, responsible, or necessary for your growth. Perhaps you walked away from relationships that didn't honor your values. Perhaps you chose personal freedom, self-discovery, or healing over settling. That isn't failure, that's integrity. The real danger of shame is that it disconnects us from others, and from ourselves. When we carry the belief that we are unworthy of love, we begin to behave in ways that protect us from rejection, but also from connection. We hide parts of ourselves, we downplay our needs, or we convince ourselves that love is not meant for us. In trying to avoid the pain of being unloved, we end up perpetuating it. So the work begins with reclaiming the narrative. Being single at 40 is not a label of deficiency, it is a context, one chapter in a life still being written. The question is not what's wrong with me, but what is life asking me to learn before love arrives in its next form. When you release the shame, you make space for curiosity. And curiosity is where healing begins, because love is not a destination. It is a mirror, and sometimes it takes being alone long enough to finally see your own reflection clearly. The truth is, there's nothing shameful about being single. The only shame is in believing that your worth depends on someone else's presence. If we look closely at the relationships that came and went, the ones that burned brightly and then quietly dissolved, we often begin to notice a pattern. Different faces, different stories, but somehow the same ending, the same argument that never really got resolved, the same moment when we began to withdraw, to doubt, to lose interest, or to feel unseen. It's tempting to think we've just had bad luck, or that people keep disappointing us. But patterns are rarely about chance. They are messages, clues pointing us towards something unresolved within ourselves. Every person we fall for reflects a part of our own psychology. Attraction is rarely random. We are drawn to what is familiar, not necessarily to what is healthy. We recreate emotional experiences that echo our earliest attachments. The way we learn to love, to trust, to reach, or to protect ourselves from pain. So if your relationships tend to last only a few months, it might not be because you can't find the right person. It might be because, deep down, you keep reenacting the same emotional story, hoping for a different ending. One person might repeatedly choose partners who are unavailable, because the chase feels like proof of worthiness. Another might lose interest as soon as intimacy deepens, because closeness triggers fear of being known, or worse, of being rejected after being known. Some people fall for potential instead of presence. Others confuse intensity for connection, mistaking chemistry for compatibility. These are not failures. They are psychological patterns rooted in how we once learned to survive love. It often says, we are not looking for our partners, we are looking for ourselves in our partners. And this is where transformation begins. Not by blaming the people who left, but by asking what part of you keeps choosing the same story. What need was never met? What fear keeps you repeating the script? The goal is not self-criticism but self-awareness, because once you can see the pattern, you can choose differently. Awareness doesn't instantly erase the behavior. You'll still feel the pull of the familiar, you'll still find yourself drawn to the same type of energy, the same dynamics, but awareness gives you a moment's pause. That small space where you can breathe, where you can say, this feels familiar. And familiar is not always safe. In that pause lies the power to rewrite your story. Patterns lose their power when you bring them into consciousness. When you stop asking, why does this always happen to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me about me? That's when growth begins. Because love isn't just something that happens between two people. It's the stage where our internal dramas play out until we learn a new script. So if every relationship seems to end the same way, perhaps the lesson isn't about finding someone different. It's about becoming someone different. The pattern breaks the moment you decide to stay, not with the other, but with yourself, long enough to understand why you keep leaving. Desire is such a fascinating paradox. We long for closeness, to be seen, understood, chosen. Yet at the same time, many of us are deeply afraid of the very intimacy we seek. We want connection, but we fear the exposure that comes with it. We want to be loved, but we dread what love might reveal about us. This inner contradiction lies at the heart of so many short-lived relationships. When someone starts to see us, really see us, we feel both excitement and terror. Because love in its pure form is a mirror. It reflects not only our beauty but also our insecurities, our vulnerabilities, our unhealed wounds. And that can be unbearable. So, consciously or not, we start to pull away, we overthink, we question, we convince ourselves that something's off, that the spark is gone, or that maybe we were never that compatible, but often what's really happening is fear. Fear of being known, fear of losing control, fear of needing someone who might not stay. For some, intimacy triggers old memories of rejection, abandonment, or neglect. The closer someone gets, the louder those memories become. Our nervous system remembers what it once felt like to be disappointed or betrayed, and it activates a quiet defense. Don't get too close. Don't trust too much. Don't need too deeply. So we retreat, we rationalize, and we call it self-protection. But in truth, it's self-limitation. There's a subtle irony here. The same fear that once kept us safe from pain now keeps us safe from love. We think we're avoiding heartbreak, but we're really avoiding depth, because to truly love is to risk being misunderstood, rejected, or left. And yet, without that risk, love never has the space to take root. Desire thrives in freedom, but intimacy thrives in safety. To build both, we must learn to hold contradiction, to let ourselves be seen without losing ourselves, to open without collapsing, to need without clinging. This is emotional maturity, the capacity to stay present with discomfort, to remain curious when fear arises instead of running from it. When we feel the urge to withdraw, we can pause and ask, what am I protecting myself from? Is it this person, or is it the fear that I will once again be hurt? That pause is everything. It's where self-awareness transforms instinct into choice. The truth is, love will always awaken fear because it demands surrender. It asks us to let go of control, of outcomes, of certainty, of our carefully constructed identities. But the alternative, to live without risking intimacy, is a far greater loss, because safety without vulnerability is not love. It's isolation dressed as independence. So the work is not to erase fear, but to dance with it, to let desire and fear coexist, and to move forward anyway, because courage in love isn't the absence of fear, it's the willingness to stay open, even when fear whispers close. We live in a world that measures love by duration. A relationship is considered successful if it lasts 5 years, 10 years, a lifetime. We celebrate anniversaries, not awareness. We value commitment, sometimes more than connection, and in doing so, we've confused longevity with depth. But time alone does not validate love. There are people who have been together for decades and haven't truly met, and there are relationships that lasted only months but changed someone's life forever. When we define success only by permanence, we turn love into a project of endurance instead of an experience of growth. We start to view endings as failures rather than as completions. Yet, every relationship, long or short, has its own purpose, its own lesson. Some relationships arrive to awaken us, some come to heal us, others come to teach us boundaries, or to show us who we are when we are loved, and when we are not. Perhaps your relationships ended not because they were meaningless, but because they fulfilled the role they were meant to play. They took you as far as you were ready to go. They held up a mirror, revealing the work still undone. If you look closely, you'll see that each one left you with something, a new awareness, a deeper truth, a part of yourself you had forgotten, and that is not failure, that is evolution. We don't talk enough about the courage it takes to leave, to walk away when the relationship no longer serves your growth, even when love still lingers. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to honor what something was, instead of forcing it to be what it can't become. Success in love isn't about holding on, it's about knowing when to let go, gracefully, consciously, without resentment. Tuti often says that in modern love, we expect one person to give us what an entire village once provided: passion, safety, belonging, excitement, meaning. We ask relationships to be everything, and when they fall short, we assume something is wrong. But maybe the problem isn't that our relationships fail. Maybe it's that our definition of success is too narrow. A successful relationship, whether it lasts 5 months or 50 years, is one that expands your capacity to love yourself, another, and the world. It's one that teaches you how to communicate more honestly, how to stay more open, how to meet both pleasure and pain with curiosity instead of fear. The duration doesn't define the depth, your presence does. So instead of asking why didn't it last, perhaps we can begin asking, what did it give me? Because the goal isn't to collect relationships that last, but to cultivate experiences that awaken. And maybe, just maybe, success in love isn't about finding someone who stays forever. It's about becoming someone who can love deeply, even when forever isn't guaranteed. Because the measure of love was never time. It's how much truth, growth, and tenderness you allowed while it lasted. There comes a point when the search for love outside of ourselves begins to feel like an echo, the same story told in different voices. You meet someone, you hope, you try, you lose, and you start again. After a while, it's easy to confuse motion with progress, but real growth doesn't happen in the next relationship. It happens in the space between them. It happens in the silence, in the waiting, in the discomfort of being alone long enough to finally meet yourself. We spend so much time trying to be chosen that we forget to do the choosing, not of another person but of ourselves. To meet yourself means to turn inward with curiosity instead of judgment. It's the moment you stop asking, why hasn't anyone loved me enough? And start asking, have I loved myself enough to know what I truly need? That question changes everything. Meeting yourself requires courage because it demands honesty. It asks you to look at the ways you've abandoned yourself. Every time you silenced your needs to keep the peace. Every time you accepted crumbs and called it love. Every time you stayed quiet when you were desperate to be seen. These small betrayals add up. They create the illusion that love is something to be earned through sacrifice, rather than something that should flow from mutual recognition. Solitude, when embraced consciously, becomes a mirror. It reveals not your emptiness, but your essence. It gives you the space to listen to the voice beneath the noise, the one that knows what kind of connection your soul truly longs for. And the truth is, once you begin to build a relationship with yourself, one rooted in respect, gentleness, and truth, you stop chasing people who can't meet you there. You stop mistaking attention for affection and chaos for chemistry. This is not about self-sufficiency in the cold, detached sense. It's not about saying, I don't need anyone. It's about developing a secure base within yourself so that when you do love, you can love freely, not from fear, not from emptiness, but from wholeness. Because when you are connected to yourself, you don't lose your center in the presence of another. You stay grounded, and that stability becomes the foundation for real intimacy. To meet yourself is to reclaim authorship of your story. You stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth or define your identity. You begin to see that your value has never depended on how long someone stayed or how deeply they loved you. It's intrinsic. It was there before anyone else arrived, and it will remain long after they go. The paradox is that the moment you stop desperately seeking love is often the moment love finds you, because now it recognizes you. You are no longer chasing connection, you are embodying it. And that is when love, in its truest form, finally has somewhere real to land. There's a moment after years of trying and hurting and starting over, when you begin to believe that love has an expiration date. You start to think that maybe your time has passed, that the doors have quietly closed while you were busy healing, working, surviving. But that belief, that love belongs to the young, to those who found it early, is one of the most damaging myths we carry. Love doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't check your age, your history, or how many times your heart has broken. It arrives when you are finally able to receive it, with both strength and softness. Hope is not naive. It's not about pretending that everything will magically fall into place. Hope is a discipline, the quiet decision to remain open even when experience has taught you to protect yourself. It's saying, I have been disappointed, but I will not let that define what I believe is possible. Because love, at its core, is not about finding the perfect person. It's about finding the courage to try again, not from emptiness, but from wisdom. By 40, you carry a library of experiences. Heartbreaks, lessons, moments of clarity, moments of confusion, all of them have been teachers. They have refined your vision of love, stripped away illusions, and shown you what truly matters. You no longer want the rush, you want the real. You're not looking for someone to fill a void, you're looking for someone to walk beside you. Someone whose presence feels like peace rather than rescue. When we stop seeing age as limitation and start seeing it as depth, the whole narrative changes. You are not late, you are seasoned. You know the cost of honesty and the value of stillness. You've learned that connection built on truth will always outlast connection built on fantasy. That maturity, that emotional literacy, is the soil where lasting love can finally grow. So perhaps being single at 40 is not the end of the story, it's the rewriting of it. It's the moment you begin to love consciously, no longer chasing, no longer settling, no longer performing. You've spent years gathering fragments of yourself through every ending, and now you finally have the chance to build something whole. Not because someone else completes you, but because you've stopped waiting for completion. The beauty of an unwritten chapter is that anything can still happen. You can fall in love again, perhaps for the first time in the truest sense, with someone else or simply with your life as it is. Love is not a reward for those who found it early. It's a possibility that belongs to anyone brave enough to stay open. Because the story isn't over until you stop believing in its next page. And love, at any age, is always waiting for those willing to turn it. So, if you've reached 40 and your story hasn't unfolded the way you imagined, let this be your reminder. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are becoming. Every ending has been a chapter of becoming more honest, more awake, more whole. Love will come again, not to rescue you, but to meet the person you finally met within yourself. Maybe the purpose of this season isn't to find the one, but to become the one. The person who knows how to love with presence, integrity, and joy. Because when you learn to stand fully in your own truth, you no longer chase love out of fear. You attract it out of peace. So take a breath, look at how far you've come. Your heart is still open, and that is your greatest strength. Thank you for sharing this space, for listening, for feeling, and for daring to believe again. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your heart.